Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are diving deep into the homeopathic therapeutic profile of opium. And let me tell you, what's described in the key text is this really fascinating study in contradictions.
Okay, so let's jump right in with the central mystery of the whole thing, and this quote from J.T. Kent just nails it. You've got this one state of complete painlessness, a kind of stupor, but then on the flip side, you have this other state of extreme pain and sensitivity. It's these two polar opposites that really define the entire picture we're about to explore.
You could almost think of it like a light switch. In one position, everything is turned off. That's the state of inactivity, torpor, and just total insensibility. But flick that switch, and suddenly everything is on full blast. That's the polar opposite state of extreme nervous excitability and hypersensitivity. So let's break down each side of this coin.
First, let's look at the side of opium that's most often described in these texts. It's this profound state of sluggishness. A state where it feels like the body's normal functions have just ground to a halt. And this slowdown, this torpor, it shows up all over the body. The sources talk about a complete shutdown of normal functions. The bowels just stop working, leading to a very specific kind of constipation, hard, round, black balls. The bladder can't empty because of a kind of paralysis. But maybe the most unique thing is this lack of what's called vital reaction, where even remedies that should work just don't. The body simply doesn't respond. And this quote right here, it paints such a vivid picture of what that deep, stuporous state actually looks like. The text described this besotted appearance, almost like someone's intoxicated. The face is dark, purplish, swollen. It's a look of just complete congestion and a real lack of vitality.
Now, this idea of painlessness is absolutely crucial. You have conditions that should be intensely painful, but in this state they're described as having zero sensation. Kent even mentions things like painless ulcers or inflammations that don't have that expected sensitivity. It's like the body's normal alarm system has been completely switched off.
So, the technical term that's often used to describe this state of inactivity is paresis, which basically just means partial paralysis. And this can affect everything from the ability to swallow, so fluids might go down the wrong way, to urination, where the muscles just don't have the strength to do their job.
All right, so let's move on to the other side of this paradox, because this is where things get really interesting. We're now talking about the alternate state of opium, one of extreme alertness and almost overwhelming sensitivity. So in total contrast to that stupor, this state can include an almost supernatural level of sensory awareness. This quote from a Materia Medica is the perfect example. Imagine being so sensitive that a clock striking or a rooster crowing way off in the distance is enough to keep you wide awake. And it's not just hearing, This state is all about a general nervous excitability. The person is described as irritable, anxious, and just acutely sensitive to both sound and light. It is the absolute opposite of the torpor we were just talking about, a state of being on constant high alert. And this symptom really illustrates that internal agitation perfectly. One of the keynotes described is this sensation that the bed is just intolerably hot. It forces the person to constantly uncover themselves or move around, trying to find a cool spot. It's such a clear physical sign of that inner state of overstimulation.
So you have to wonder, right? What on earth brings on these extreme opposite states? Well, according to the source material, the trigger isn't usually a physical problem. It's a profound emotional shock.
The texts all point to these sudden, overwhelming emotions as the root cause. And yeah, this includes negative shocks like fright or anger or even shame. But here's what's truly wild. Even an overwhelmingly positive event, like excessive joy, is cited as a potential trigger. And there's a really clear sequence that's described in the sources. First, you have the intense emotional shock. Then, and this is the key part, the mental impression of that shock, the image or the fear, it gets stuck. It remains. And finally, that lingering mental state is what's said to eventually show up as a physical complaint. Yeah, so the crucial point is that the initial shock just doesn't fade away. The memory of it, or the image of it, gets locked in the mind. Kent actually describes a patient where the object that frightened them just continually looms before their eyes, long after the event is over. And this lingering fear is then pointed to as the direct cause of some really serious physical conditions. The texts list things like convulsions, involuntary diarrhea, the stopping of menses, or even a threatened abortion, all of it stemming directly from an unresolved fright.
Okay, so let's try and put all of this together now.
Let's see how these paradoxical symptoms and these intense emotional triggers actually come together in some of the specific clinical examples that are cited in the texts.
You can really see the pattern in conditions like apoplexy or what we'd call a stroke. It's described with what's called stertorous breathing, which is a kind of heavy, deep snoring, a dark red face, and contracted pupils. And we see a really similar picture in convulsions in children, which are often said to be triggered by a fright that the nursing mother experienced. In both cases, the physical symptoms really seem to mirror the emotional cause.
The sources also use this really striking description for infants with marasmus, which is a form of severe malnutrition. The child is described as being all wrinkled up, looking like a little dried-up old man. It's this powerful image connecting that state of wasting away directly to the opium profile. And this just reinforces a key idea from the texts, that opium is particularly well suited for what they call the first and second childhood. They're talking about the extremes of life, infancy and old age. These are periods that are characterized by their own unique vulnerabilities and ways of reacting to shock.
So when you look at it all, the profile of opium, as it's described in these texts, is this incredible landscape of extremes, from a complete shutdown to a state of hyper-awareness. All of it apparently triggered by a single emotion. It really leaves us with a compelling question, doesn't it? How powerfully can a single moment, a single feeling, actually reshape our entire physical reality?